Welcome to the G5 Hive, the next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening at podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the American Athletic Conference to take a look at the East Carolina Pirates, who finished 8-5 in 2024 and capped off their season with a win over NC State in the Military Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with an open practice on April 26th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the Hoist the Colors podcast host. He covers East Carolina athletics and recruiting for Hoist the Colors on the 24/7 Sports Network. He is Stephen Igoe. Stephen can be found on X at Stephen Igoe. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Absolutely, man. Thrilled to be back. First off, props on the intro. Creative, very well done. Love seeing all those highlights, and it brings back a lot of memories. And but yeah, man, just thrilled to be back. And almost here. Football's almost here, man. It's really hard to believe. It feels like the offseason in some ways has gone slow, but has also kind of flown by. So ready to kick this thing off here shortly.
Now we're glad to have you, and yeah, I don't know when East Carolina opens up camp. I know Old Dominion opens up camp. I think either the 30th or 31st, so just a couple weeks away, and all kinds of news. For those that are turning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering ECU football?
So I grew up in Greenville, North Carolina, to no surprise, and I grew up in an East Carolina family, and kind of grew up a fan of the program. And I just felt growing up as not to go too far off the, away from the question, but like I grew up a Seattle Mariners and Denver Broncos fan. And like you can't get any local coverage from those teams. And I pick my favorite teams based off my favorite players because I get that question a lot, John Elway and King Griffey Jr. But anyways, um, you know, so I knew how much online coverage meant, and so that kind of led me to start. All right, what is ECU media coverage missing? Well, when I was in school, in high school, going to ECU, I realized there was no real online presence. I started Hoist the Colors in 2010 as an independent site. We joined 24/7 Sports in 2012 when they were a startup, and we've been rolling ever since. So I've been covering ECU since 2010. It was a slow build, but definitely worth it. And I'd be lying if I said I thought we'd ever get to this point, to where it's really, pretty booming business as far as coverage and all that with the radio show as well. And it's awesome. I get to cover my alma mater, the team I grew up watching. Obviously, when you get into the media side, you become a little bit less of a fan because you see how the sausage is made, so to speak. But it's still, nothing beats going to these games, covering it, getting to know the coaches, the players, interacting with the fans. Because I feel like I know what they want because I grew up an East Carolina fan, so I try to deliver that type of content. So that's really a little bit about me and how we got started. So I've been covering ECU since 2010.
Well, let's move over to some ECU football talk, and we'll start with the man in charge. ECU has a new head coach in 2025. Well, sort of. Mike Houston was relieved of his head coaching duties after a 3-4 start to last season, at which point defensive coordinator Blake Harrell took over as head coach, leading them to 5 victories and only 1 loss the rest of the way. What can you tell us about Coach Harrell and what he brings to the table for the Pirates?
Yeah, it's really an interesting guy. Blake Harrell, an interesting situation, I should say, because Blake Harrell is a Mike Houston guy, but they are very different in terms of personality. Like I kind of, Mike Houston, he coached the Citadel. He was a triple option background, and Blake was on those staffs at Lenore Ryan and the Citadel. But like Mike Houston just is so, clean cut, do it by the book, like military style, a bit of a, hard nosed, and not saying that that's the wrong way at all because he had success at East Carolina, at times doing those things, and he had big successes other institutions doing those things. But, Blake, much more relaxed. Not that he doesn't take things seriously, but he's just much more of a player's coach. He introduced shorter practices after taking the job. He took a lot of wear and tear off the players as far as practice, and there's a balance to that because you can become unprepared or undisciplined. And at times they had some penalty issues in games, and I think a lot of that was a result of maybe backing off a little bit, going to more of a player's coach style. But the players responded, man. I mean, you look at obviously the schedule had a factor, but I just think the way he was able to, there was kind of a cloud over the program Everybody knew Mike Houston was in trouble. They were coming off a 2-10 season. There was a lot of pressure. It just felt tight. And then, like, when Houston was let go, it just really eased everybody up. We got nothing to lose, all that good stuff. And that allowed, Blake Harrell to kind of play to his strengths. He still kept that mentality, after he got the job. Obviously didn't work out well in the Navy game, but that was a weird week. You introduced a head coach 2 days before the game. Yeah, I thought we saw in the bowl game a return to that mentality, and we saw it pay off in a big way with a win over NC State, and they've kept that mentality this spring. Shorter practices, much more free atmosphere. I am interested to see how it plays out over a full off season now, because that is different from taking over a job in season. But it just feels like it's, being out of practice, it's just eased up the tension. There's always going to be pressure and tension in major college football, but it feels like a much more relaxed and friendly atmosphere right now that the players are really bought into. And it reminds me a lot of the Ruff McNeil era, to be quite honest.
Well, while offensive coordinator John David Baker is not new to the team, this team really seemed to explode after the head coaching change. Can you describe the type of offense that Coach Baker runs here at East Carolina?
So he runs a lot of the, it's kind of a blend of the Art Briles and Lane Kiffin philosophies, really wide horizontal splits with the receivers, to really stretch you horizontally. And then if you're light in the box, they'll hit you with the running game. If you cheat in the box, they'll hit you with the RPO passing game. So a lot of RPOs, a lot of vertical concepts built into the passing game. So they stretch you horizontally and vertically, which, has become more common in college football, but it's still, and it's kind of a, I don't know, some people don't like the offense because they feel it's a little bit, it's kind of easy to know what's coming, but stopping it is the whole other animal, because you just have to cover so much of the field. And if you have speed, which East Carolina does, and you have the right quarterback, and you've got a good enough offensive line, it can become a very challenging offense to stop. But it's all about getting players in space, and then just finding the taking the number, so to speak. If you got the right amount of defenders, versus your offensive players on one side of the field versus the other, or a light box, you attack and take what the defense is giving you. And that's kind of what, and you marry that with a fast-paced offense. You're trying to snap the ball as much as possible. Now, the interesting thing about JDB, John David Baker, is he was up in the press box for the first half of the season. When Mike Houston was let go, he came down to the field. And JDB is a very young guy. I think 33, 34 years old. I don't know his exact age right now, but his energy, much like Blake Harrell, it just like bled into the team. Like, you saw a very tight sideline when Houston was a head coach. All of a sudden, JDB's down the field. Blake Harrell's down the field, obviously, because he's not calling defensive plays anymore. He's running the show. And like that energy just kind of built into the sideline. You're having success too. That helps. But I just think high energy, fast pace, like it just played better. It came together. And that also coincided with the switch. Caden Hauser was went from backup quarterback to starter around that time. So it all really kind of came together in kind of magical fashion. But definitely JDB, he's a young, fiery coach, runs that high up-tempo, wide pace, or, wide out, spread out offense.
Well, let's move over to the group that kind of leads this offense. That's the quarterbacks. Jake Garcia won the starting job to start to 2024, but as you mentioned, we saw Caden Hauser kind of take over there around midseason, right, kind of coincided with the coaching change. In a 5-week span, Pirates fans saw Hauser throw for 1,443 yards and 15 touchdowns, with back-to-back 5-touchdown games in weeks 9 and 10. After the spring, we saw Jake Garcia head over to Michigan, and the staff brought in Mike Wright from Northwestern. With Hauser being the unquestioned starter leading into the 2025 season, what growth are you expecting to see from him here in year 2?
That I actually wrote about that earlier. Today. I know we're recording this different when it will air, but you can check it out, hoistthecolors.net, kind of a preseason camp preview. And I wrote that, the 2 areas he really needs to improve on. And honestly, if he extrapolates what he did over the 7 starts over a full season, it would rank near the top of the league in terms of production. So he already does a lot of really good things. But the biggest thing was the turnovers. He had 11 interceptions. In 7 starts, he had at least 1 interception in 6 of those starts, multiple interceptions in 3 of those starts, excuse me. So Jake Garcia turned the ball over at an alarming rate. That's why he lost the job. Caden Hauser still turned it over. The difference was when he wasn't turning it over, he was scoring just about every time. So it was almost like it was a touchdown or a turnover. They very rarely punted during that stretch. And I think, first time in the offense, you're going to misread some things. And again, a lot of it is predicated on what the defense is giving you. Well, if you haven't seen a certain defensive look based upon a certain offensive call, then sometimes you're going to misread that. So I think it's becoming more consistent with your reads. And the other thing is he graded out elite down the field passing, which part of that was Anthony Smith, who's special, and I'm sure we'll talk about at receiver. But, intermediate wise, I feel like he can be a little more consistent with his accuracy. He was good in the short game. He was good in the deep game. He didn't grade out. He graded out around average in the intermediate game per Pro Football Focus. So if he can become a little bit more consistent, intermediate wise, and just to me, just avoiding the turnovers. At times it was like the offense really didn't get stopped. It was a matter of they stopped themselves with penalties and turnovers. And JDB, the offensive coordinator, really echoed that in the spring. He's like, look, man, ECU, I wrote about this as well. ECU, they led the country in giveaways last year with 30. They were -8 in turnover margin, which was 111th. Arkansas was the only other team that finished with a winning record with a turnover margin that was a similar or the same or worse. So a lot of bad teams turned the ball over a lot. ECU had a good record and turned the ball over a ton. So what can happen if you take that margin the other way? And that's really, I think, kind of the goal this offseason is to clean up those turnovers and really just have as many chances as possible to score touchdowns.
For those that are not familiar with Caden Hauser, how would you describe his playing style?
He is definitely more, he's definitely more of a pocket passer. But as he showed, if anybody watched the Military Bowl, like he can move a little bit too. Like he's not really a runner. They call him Vanilla Vic in the program. Like it's kind of a joke just because like when he does run, if like somehow defenders can't catch him. He's had some pretty incredible runs at times, but like he's probably like a 4.7 guy at best in the 40, probably more like 4.8. But like he's got good enough feet that when he gets into trouble, he extends plays, and that's the biggest thing. So like he's not like immobile in the pocket, but he's definitely more of a pocket passer, and he's a pretty quick release, quick decision maker. He can go through his progressions. He's definitely better at that than Garcia was, who was pretty much a one read and go guy. But I think he's just kind of your traditional college quarterback now. Like not many of these guys are statues. And if they're not like true dual threats, then they can move a little bit. And I would put him, in that category.
Well, I mentioned Garcia hitting the portal and the staff bringing in Mike Wright. However, junior Raheem Jeter and two true freshmen, Cole Hodge and Chasten Ditter, are in this room. In the spring, did anyone kind of step up and take control of that number 2 QB job?
In the spring, really, they didn't. And I think that's a big reason why they added Mike Wright post-spring. I would say if the season started today, Raheem Jeter is probably leading the next group just because of his experience in the program. But Chasten Ditta for a true freshman looked really good. And Cole Hodge, he was coming off hip surgery. I think he'll improve in time. But that's how the order I would kind of put it in right now. Like Mike Wright, Raheem Jeter, Chasten Ditta, Cole Hodge. And, they added Wright because, as you know, I mean, you're always one hit away. And losing Jake mid-spring – was a tough blow. Like Jake Garcia as a backup quarterback. I mean, Michigan just took him as a backup quarterback. So, like, that's a pretty big value to have. Well, all of a sudden you can add Mike Wright as a backup quarterback, a guy who has, let's be real, pretty pedestrian passing numbers, but is an elite athlete. He's ran as fast as 21.8 miles per hour in his career on the football field for a 73-yard touchdown. So the guy's an elite weapon. And I think the goal is not only to have him as a backup quarterback, but how can we utilize him in other ways? And I think you're going to see him in gadget situations. I think you're going to see him potentially split out wide at receiver. When he entered the portal, he didn't rule out the possibility of playing a receiver. ECU is going to play him at quarterback, but I think they're going to do a lot of different things with him. JDB will use a lot of special packages. So, look, Mike Wright will be your backup, and I think Raheem Jeter your third, and then we'll see after that. But that's how I would kind of put it today.
For those not familiar with Jeter's playing style, how would you describe him?
Jeter, he's kind of similar to Hauser in that, like, he can run a little bit. He's probably a little more athletic than Hauser, but like he's not really a big runner either. He's a guy that he would like to beat you from the pocket. I think he's like 6'3", 200 pounds. Really good physical looking athlete. Like he was built that way at Spartanburg High School in South Carolina. He was a one-time West Virginia commit. He was a big-time quarterback prospect early in his high school career. So like physically, he has all the tools. They've kind of retooled his throwing motion over the last few years. They've tightened it up a little bit, and I think that's kind of led to some inaccuracy issues at times. But he's come on strong over the last year, I would say. Definitely more of a guy who in the short passing game, I think is built for that right now. And then like he's not really a burner, but he's a guy who if it's 3rd and 3, you're not afraid to like design a quarterback power because he has a big enough body. He can barrel over a guy or two. So um, you know, similar to Hauser in some ways, but different enough for sure that he's probably a little bit better runner.
Let's move over to this running back room. And the Pirates graduate their workhorse running back from a season ago in Rajai Harris. But this room does return London Montgomery and Marlon Gunn Jr. That duo combined for 132 carries and 583 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2024. The staff also added Parker Jenkins from Houston prior to the spring. Steven, what are your expectations for this, what seems like a very talented and loaded running back room heading into 2025?
It'll be a theme during this offensive portion, but I'm very high on the skill position players for East Carolina, especially at running back. I do question, will they have a bell cow like a Rajay? But like, Rajay, as good as he was, like he almost did that off sheer determination and just physicality and toughness and leadership. Like, I don't know if he was that much more talented than the rest of the room, but he was just like, he was the guy. He was going to be the guy, and nobody was going to tell him otherwise. So, like, to me, who's going to replace that mentality? Because, like, I think talent-wise, they're there. London Montgomery, former Penn State transfer, he's pretty dynamic in terms of speed. He's got really good top-end speed, good burst. He doesn't have a ton of wiggle, but, like, if the hole's there, he's going to make positive yardage in a hurry. Parker Jenkins, transfer from Houston. When he got his opportunity as a freshman at Houston, he was very impressive. He's a big physical guy. He also can really run. He's been one of their fastest runners. So, like, if he has a home run, he has a chance to hit it. Marlon Gunn, he is like a true bruiser. Big physical dude. He's been that way since he was a freshman. He dealt with a leg injury last year, but he's finally healthy now. He's not a guy you want to see in the hole because he's not we've kind of joked about it in the past. He doesn't even try to make guys miss. He's looking for contact. So he's not even looking for big runs. He's just like seeking out contact. That's the type of runner he is. And then, the kind of the sleeper is, and really there's two. DeJuan Lacey is a JUCO guy they were extremely high on. He had to get his knee scoped, cleaned up in the spring. So he missed the spring, but he was in for, winter workouts. He'll be back for the fall. He was a 1,000-yard rusher at JUCO. Really shifty. He's probably more your shifty, one cut and go type runner. And then TJ Engelman, redshirt freshman out of Cincinnati. He probably has your most elusiveness, probably your smallest of the bunch. But I think they go 5 deep, and that's not even counting Eddie Love, who was a true freshman running back who enrolled this summer that was highly recruited, and Josh Benton's a walk on. So like that they really like. So I think 6, 7 deep. I wouldn't rule it out. Now you're not going to play that many guys, but I just don't know who's going to be the guy. I think they've got a lot of guys, and I think they'll be productive as a unit. I just am curious to see who's going to establish himself as like the clear top guy.
Do you think the staff wants, a workhorse guy, or do you think they want a committee?
JDB has honestly said he prefers, if you could have a 1,000-yard rusher, I think every coach would take that. But he said he prefers having 3 guys. And that's how they did it at Ole Miss, and that's how they did it at USC when he was an assistant there, and even at North Texas back then when he was there. So, I think he prefers let's have 3 guys, and they're all solid. Maybe not one of them is great, but they all do a little different something well. I think he honestly would like to go that route to keep them fresh. They had to kind of ride Rajay pretty hard last year because Marlon Gunn was beat up, and they didn't really have a ton of depth, and that's really changed this offseason with the additions and some of the development of some of the young guys.
I realize we got some time before that first game, but if you had to take a guess today, which running back do you think gets that first carry against NC State week one?
I think first carry, like Blake Carroll is a pretty loyal guy, and like I feel like as long as Marlon Gunn's healthy, like he's your senior, he's been in the program all 4 years. He could have transferred. I think he gets your first carry just out of principle because like he's kind of your tone setter, physical guy. But like, I mean, I could pick four different dudes. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, realistically, if I was making betting odds, I'd go Marlon Gunn, followed by London Montgomery, followed by Parker Jenkins, followed by DeJuan Lacey. But I think it'll be one of Gunn or Montgomery just because they were on the team last year and the coaches trust them right now.
Well, let's move over to this wide receiver room, and it's like you said, you're excited about these skill positions. This wide receiver room could very well be one of the best wide receiver rooms in the G5. But they do lose some folks by way of graduation or portal. They lose three of their top four wideouts from a season ago. Winston Wright Jr. and Jahari Patterson have graduated, while Chase Sowell has transferred over to Iowa State. That trio accounted for 172 targets, 1,522 yards, and 12 touchdowns in 2024. This 2025 room is highlighted by the return of a pair of outside receivers in Yannick Smith and their leading receiver in terms of yardage, Anthony Smith. The staff also made some additions to this room via the portal, bringing in Jaquez Padaway from Oklahoma, Tyler Johnson from Penn State, and Peyton Magram from South Carolina. Stephen, what are your expectations of this room heading into 2025, and how they look in the spring?
I expect this room to be good. I'd be disappointed if it was not good. It was kind of a blessing in disguise looking back on it. Chase Sowell, he got hurt late in the year. I want to say the Tulsa game, maybe. Yeah, he didn't play in the final three games. So Yannick Smith, who was a former four-star recruit, true freshman, he stepped in that starting role across from Anthony Smith. And over those 3 games, he went 7 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown at North Texas. He went 3 catches, 66 yards and a touchdown against Navy, and then 3 catches, 56 yards against NC State in the bowl game. So, like, that was kind of your sneak peek of, all right, these are the 2 Smiths now. These are our 2 starters at outside going forward. And then Anthony Smith, he's just look, he is what he is. And he's a 6'3" guy who runs a 4.4, maybe a sub 4.4. He's an absolute burner. His job is to run down the field, create separation. He averaged like 20 yards a catch last year. He's just extremely fast. And the thing he showed last year is that he can make plays underneath too. So, like, you've got the burner on one side, and then you've got Yannick, who's 6'3", 207 pounds, and just a physical specimen. I mean, just being real, like, those guys, they could have gone to just about any school in the Southeast and competed for playing time. They chose to come back. ECU's NIL initiative played a big role in that. So you start with those 2. You lose Winston Wright in the slot, but they feel very good internally about Jaquez Petaway, Oklahoma transfer. He had a really good spring. Also keep an eye on Jiron Waiters, redshirt freshman, who got a lot of time in the spring with the ones, really shifty, jet sweep motion type of guy. With good speed. And then Peyton Mangum, he can play inside or outside. You also have a couple of young guys that are developing in Malik Leverett and Brock Spalding that I think will play in this receiving room. And the name, Tyler Johnson, he did not catch a pass at Penn State, but when I was out of practice, man, every single day he was making plays. And the coaches that I talked to were just like, how do we get this guy? Like, this dude catches everything. He's getting separation. He's consistent, and he's got great hands. I guess the one thing he doesn't have is great size. Like, he's only 6 foot, I think 180, 190 pounds, but, like, he's just a receiver. Like, sometimes you just go out there and you watch a bunch of, physically gifted 6'3" guys struggle to catch the football. Well, this guy, he's got great body control, catches everything. I think he's going to play outside, and he'll find a way onto the field because he's too good not to. So, like, I feel pretty good 5'6", maybe even 7 deep about this receiving corps. So I'd be surprised if there's any drop off in terms of production, to be honest. I think Chase Sowell was a good player. I think they can replace him. Winston Wright, definitely a big time player, but I think with Petaway and Waiters, you can make up for that production in many ways. So I feel like with Yannick and Anthony Smith's coming back, I think they're going to be pretty good and have a nice blend of a little bit of everything at receiver.
I mentioned all those targets and yards kind of up for grabs. How how would you handicap those kind of getting split up? We know Anthony Smith's going to get his, but like when I look at it, it feels like, man, there's three, maybe four guys that are probably going to eat in this offense.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll have a 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, like I think it'll be similar to last year in that, like Anthony is your big play, X receiver that's always going to be stretching the field. So he's not going to have the high volume of catches, but he's going to have the yards.
Yeah.
Yannick, I think, is kind of a tweener in that he could have games where if they like the one-on-one matchup, he could be targeted a lot. But he's also a kind of a vertical threat, one-on-one jump ball type of guy. So I really think your high volume targets are going to come in the slots or at tight end too. Like I think they're going to value that position as well with what's coming back there. But typically in this type of offense, it is spread out pretty evenly because it is so determined upon what the defense is giving you. So if they're giving you the little bubble screen on those horizontal splits, you could see, a Yannick or Anthony have more catches. But if they're prioritizing taking that away, then I think you're going to see less volume but more yards downfield. So I think it will be honestly split pretty evenly to answer your question.
If you were to describe how the tight ends are utilized in this offense to someone that's never caught a Pirates game, how would you describe it?
It is a lot. It's pretty much predominantly 11 personnel in that it's one back, one tight end offense, three receivers at all time. And I mean, the only time they really get out of that is if it's like, 3rd and 1, because they don't sub. You want to go fast, you stay in the same offense with the same personnel. So it's basically those guys. The interesting thing about them is they could be in the backfield, they could be in line, they could be in the slot, and they've got different tight ends within this offense. But that is essentially how it's used. And they do go goal line, they do go short yardage when they need to, but they don't really want to stop and sub. So a lot of that will be coming out of like a timeout or something. If they don't like a look, they'll come back, bring in a different personnel package. But it's pretty much 11 personnel. They always have a tight end on the field, and really that guy can line up all over.
Is there anyone in this tight end room that we kind of need to keep our eye on here in 2025?
The two big guys are DeCirio Riles and Javonte Connor. Like, I don't know if, and I hesitate to put this out there because, like, I want to see them go and do it. Like, having talent and ability is one thing, but I just want to see them go out and catch passes. But these two guys are probably as gifted as tight ends as ECU's had in a long time. Like Javonte Connor is a former Ole Miss transfer. Like the first time I saw him last preseason camp, 6'4", 230, he just looked like an NFL tight end. Like incredible body, incredible size and length. But you could tell maturity-wise he was not where he needed to be. So he didn't play a lot last year. He did catch a touchdown in a blowout win, but this, he'll be the second tight end this year, probably behind DeCirio Riles, who also has good size. DeCirio's 6'3", 238. He was a high school quarterback. All-around athlete, can really run. So, like, both those guys, they've got all-conference ability, but having that ability is one thing. Being consistent at the tight end position where you're blocking your tail off every single play, you're having to run routes, you're having to line up in different spots, you've got different assignments. Like, it's probably the hardest position in the offense besides quarterback, realistically. So, like, just because a guy looks good in practice, I'm still somewhat of a skeptic. I want to see them do it in a game, but these guys have the potential. So remember the name, DeCirio Riles and Javonte Connor. Don't be surprised if one of those guys has a breakout year. I'll just share a quick story. So Javonte Connor, I don't think they'll care that I'm putting this out there, but Javonte Connor, he caught a just incredible pass in practice, like above two defenders, like full extension in spring ball, and they tweeted the video of it, and the next day an ACC school was in his DMs trying to get him in the portal. So, like, that shows you, A, that's college football now, but B, that the type of talent he has just based off one practice clip.
Yeah, it's definitely a crazy time. Well, let's move over to this offensive line. They'll look to replace three graduates in 2025: center Dustin Hall, left tackle Parker Moorer, and Hampton Ergel, who started at right guard and then moved to left guard about halfway through the season. This 2025 line will be anchored by the return of right guard Emmanuel Poku and right tackle Jamarian McCrimmon. This room also returns left guard Darius Bell, who saw some valuable game action in 2024. What are your expectations for this offensive line as we head into fall camp?
I feel pretty good about it. Like I don't think there's if you interview like all these Group of Five reporters and they feel great about the offensive line, I just don't know if they're telling the truth. I mean, like me even saying I feel pretty good about it, I feel like I kind of like cringe as I say that because you just never know, man. You can never have enough offensive line depth. The thing that worries me
Yeah.
most is Carson Jones was their projected starting center. He came in last offseason as a transfer and developed. He was having a great spring, and then he goes out and hurts his knee mid spring. He'll probably be out the entire season. So all of a sudden, what you kind of have on paper right away, you're having to shuffle some pieces around. They also brought in Drew McCullough, Presbyterian transfer starting center. They moved Darius Bell, from guard to center, and they moved Bryce Weaver, who was working at tackle and guard to center. So like I guess you'd rather have that happen in the spring than like the week before the season because you got
Sure.
all off season to worry about it. But that worries me. As you said, they do have some experience coming back though. Jamarion McCrimmon and Kojo Emmanuel Poco, he goes by Kojo within the program. Both those guys, they could play at the powerful level. They have that type of talent and ability. And I think Landon Jamarion McCrimmon, who's just a redshirt sophomore, but he's like 6'5", 300 pounds. Keeping him to develop him within the program is huge. You know, they are switching him to left tackle because Parker Moore's graduation, so he's going from right tackle to left tackle. Cooper Trivnaski is a transfer they brought in from Newberry College. They were extremely high on. He went through the spring. He'll probably be your starting right tackle. Center is kind of an open question. Kyle Long is a transfer they brought in from Maryland. Big, physical, like 6'6", 320. He'll probably start at one of the guard positions. And then, depending on what happens at center, you could see a couple of those guys competing for a spot at center also slide over to guard or start there. So, like, I feel like they're like 7 to 8 bodies that I feel pretty good about. And I think, I've talked with Steve Shankweiler, former ECU offensive line coach, about this. He's like, you really just want 8 guys you feel good about going into game day. Because, like, you want somebody that can snap it and you want 2 tackles that can stand up. And then, like, you can just figure out the rest. You just want a couple guys who can play multiple positions amongst that 8 because you're always having to shuffle and you're always losing guys to injury. But that's kind of how I would kind of handicap it. Like, I mean, I've seen much worse ECU offensive lines in practice for sure. So, like, this is a scheme too that, to me, really it takes some pressure off your O line with the RPO system. And so, like, I feel like they're going to be pretty good up front, and that's probably good enough with the talent they have elsewhere.
Who does this offensive line look to as their leader?
That's a great question because Dustin Hall was one of the leaders of the offense last year. And then you lose Parker and Hampton Erg on top of that. So, like, you are losing your leadership. And Jamarion and Kojo are pretty quiet guys, and they're still relatively young. So I think that's a question that I honestly don't know the answer to. I think in many ways your center has to be your leader. And so, like, in the spring, they talked about Bryce Weaver, who's a local DH Conley product, who slid inside. They were like, we actually like Bryce at center because he's kind of boisterous. Like, he kind of has that personality where he can step up and be a leader. So, like, naturally, some of the guys who have played are going to be a leader caliber, type of dude. But I think that's something that has to work itself out. And I really think whoever wins the center position will have to end up kind of being that guy, whether he wants to or not.
Well, let's assume this offensive line just crushes it here in 2025. It's because who stepped up big?
That is another good question. I think they're going to need Cooper Trivnaski to play well at right tackle. he was an all conference Division II player, I believe. And so like making that jump to D1, even though he looked good in the spring, that's a big jump. So they're going to need him to play well. And then I think one of the centers, whether it's Darius Bell, whether it's Bryce Weaver or Drew McCullough, those would be the three guys I would expect to get a shot there. I think those are I think Jamarion McCrimmon, Kojo Poku, and Kyle Long are going to be solid. I think whoever plays center and then Cooper Trubnasky are going to have to be good for the offensive line to have success.
All right, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be? And when we say breakout, it doesn't have like East Carolina fans know a lot about these guys, right? It can be someone that's going to have like a breakout year on like a national level.
If I had to pick one guy, I mean, I think I have to go Yannick Smith because I feel like he's got NFL potential. So like to me, you want to talk about like national breakout guy or at least regional breakout guy, like a guy who, to me has that ability is Yannick Smith. He's got all the physical tools. I hope he stays away from the sophomore slump because, watching him at practice in the spring, I'm like, he kind of seemed a little, cocky out there because like he was coming off a pretty good finish to the year. So I want to see him keep that hunger and that edge because he is, the guy that, the young kids say that he's got that dog in him. He's got that dog in him, man. He's an animal when he gets into the zone. So like, I just want to see him play like that every snap. And if he does, like he could be extremely special. And they got to find a way to get that out of him. But he's definitely, if I had to, handicap it, he'd be my pick.
All right, well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And as we mentioned earlier, defensive coordinator Blake Harrell is now the head coach. That means there's a new defensive coordinator here, and that's Josh Aldridge. Coach Aldridge comes over from Auburn, where he served as the defensive ends coach in 2024 and the linebackers coach in 2023. Can you describe the type of defensive scheme that Coach Aldridge plans to run here at East Carolina?
I think it is going to be very similar to what Blake run with some differences, or Blake ran with some differences. Blake ran kind of it was really a hybrid, like 3-4, but also 4-2-5 defense, because essentially you've got 4 down D linemen, but the fourth guy is a stand-up outside linebacker. Like I feel like everybody's kind of running this now. I don't know what we just call it multiple, but then you've got the 2 inside linebackers, and you've got the nickel, and then you got the 2 safeties and the 2 corners. I would expect it to look something like that, which is pretty standard in today's college football. And, I would say the one thing that may change with his scheme is you may see at times, instead of just the 1 outside linebacker, you may see 2 outside linebackers as your ends. And instead of the traditional nickel back being a smaller DB, you may see a bigger linebacker type, depending on what the personnel package is. So I think he's got, maybe a little bit more versatility, but Blake was pretty multiple and versatile too. I think Blake Harrell also called it extremely aggressively. I would expect Josh Aldridge to be pretty damn aggressive as well, watching, the way he goes about things. So, like, I think there's going to be some similarities, but also enough differences to where, if you're NC State preparing for August 28th and you go back and watch Liberty's 2022 film when he was calling it there, you're going to see enough differences to where you're not just able to assume it's going to be the same defense. So, it's kind of a nice blend. Like he brings something new, but also something similar. So I would expect, for the personnel that is returning, which is not as much as maybe you'd hope for, as I'm sure we'll get into, it'll be a pretty simple process.
Well, let's move over to those position groups, and we'll start with the guys up front along that defensive line. This group takes a hit in the interior as they see Elijah Morris, Deonta Johnson, Jaden McKenzie, Sarad Ware all graduate. Additionally, CJ Mims hit the portal. He's off to North Carolina. Those 5 accounted for 76 pressures and 9 sacks in 2024. Looking at the edge position, they look to be in pretty good shape as they return a nice trio of Raheem Craig, Josiah Robinson, and J.D. Lampley. What are your expectations for this defensive line in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, you put it well. I think the defensive, like the ends and the edge group, I feel pretty good about because like Lampley, if you look at his sack numbers, are not great, but like if you look at his pressure numbers on PFF, like he's off the charts. Like the guy just needs to find a way to get the quarterback on the ground, man, because he's back there like every damn play, creating havoc. But he's good, and Raheem Craig is also pretty good as well. So like, those are going to be your two starting edge guys. Josiah Robinson, when he's healthy, is a freak as well. They added Kendrick DeJour, a transfer from Sam Houston State, who's 6'5", 230. He can rush the passer. So like, I feel pretty good about those four guys. You also got Kieran Davis, who's a younger up and comer at outside defensive end, excuse me, who I think is going to be pretty good. So like, good about edge, and then D tackle. It's just a question mark, man. I'm just going to call it what it is, and this will be the same way when I talk about the corners and the safety in some respect too. Like none of these guys have played at ECU because the group you mentioned they played like almost every snap since 2020. So like everybody knew this was coming, that these guys wouldn't be able to play forever. Although NCAA rules now, maybe they'll come back as like 15th year players here shortly. Um, and like you're not going to take them out of the lineup as they're going through their careers, and like they were deep as it is. So like the good news is, if I had to say the two projected starters today, Preston Carr and Zion Wilson, they have been in the program. They just haven't played because of what was in front of them. So they are older, physical, mature kids, 6'3", 300 plus pounds. They've been waiting for this moment. They had good springs. Roy Tesh is one of the best defensive line coaches in the business. He coached the whole group you mentioned as true freshmen in 2020 and kind of built them into what they are. So, like, if anybody can do it, it's Tesh. I trust his development and evaluations. And then they brought in a lot of transfers as well. Losing CJ Mims was an unexpected blow. He was the guy they had kind of expected to be the anchor of the D line, and he goes on to North Carolina. But yeah, they brought in Justin Benton from Houston, who's a physical interior guy. They also brought back Xavier McIver, who he was with that 2020 D-line class. Everybody you mentioned that graduated, well, he redshirted one of those years, so he has an extra year because he went to UT Martin, and then he comes back for his final year of eligibility. It's college football. It's ridiculous. They also brought in Ryan Roseborough, a transfer as well, and then they have 1 to 2 like redshirt freshman type of guys they've been developing. So, they have 6-7 legitimate big physical bodies in there that they're counting on. So I don't think they're not like void of numbers. They're just void of experience. And as you know, like you just don't know until they go out there and play. And so they're saying all the right things. They've got the size, they've got the numbers, and now it's just, all right, can they be at least competent as a unit once they hit the field?
Looking on that interior, and you mentioned all those transfers, is there one of those transfers that you think can come in and kind of make an instant impact for this defense?
I think they all can be pretty good, honestly. And they also brought in like some really good interior defensive line in this freshman class. Now, I'm not going to rely on a freshman to come in and play right away because I'm just not going to do that. But like if I had to pick a guy who like has, to me, like breakout potential, it's like I think McIver will play because he knows the system and he's been in it. But like Justin Benton, to me, would be the guy. He was a near 4-star recruit out of transferring over from Houston. So like he's strong as an ox. He's built. It's just how does he fit in with this system? So I would say Justin Benton from Houston is like, to me, probably has the highest ceiling of the group. I do like Ryan Roseborough as well, coming back as a local kid from Towson. But if I had to pick one, I'd say Benton.
We talked about the edge group, and that there's a lot of talent there. Is there one guy you kind of see kind of taking his game to the next level and up in those sack numbers?
If Lampley can tackle the quarterback, I would say him. Like he's the obvious choice, but Josiah Robinson, if he can just stay healthy, man, he is a physical freak. He has had major knee issues though. Like I hesitate to say his name because every time I talk about him or like I ask about him, he gets hurt. But I'm going to go with Josiah Robinson. He transferred in like 4 or 5 years ago as a Michigan State transfer, or 3-4 years ago, excuse me, and just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So I'm going to go Josiah Robinson. I'm going to hope that this is the year he stays healthy because he's got pure pass rush ability and he's been really good in the weight room this offseason.
Well, moving over to the linebackers, this room will look to replace two starters as Mike Edwards III has graduated and Zakai Barker is off to SMU. I would assume that means we'll see even more of Damian Wilson, Samuel Dinka, and DJ Johnson Jr. here in 2025. How did the linebackers look in the spring?
Up and down, I would say. Aldridge, who is the DC, obviously is coaching the inside linebackers too. He's always going to be like tough in his room, but he was like, look, some days we're good, some days we're up and down. I think Zakai Barker he was an eraser. I mean, he was a guy who, when he was in the lineup, he just made such a difference. He always seemed to make the tackle. And so, like, losing him, who they felt pretty good about returning until he hit the portal kind of as a surprise, was a blow. And getting Damian Wilson back is big. And I think also they moved Danka, who was more of an edge guy last year, into inside linebacker. I'm interested to see how that's going to go. They also moved Jackson Barker, who also was an edge guy, inside linebacker. Those are two. They're like 6'3", or they're longer linebackers. So like Danka is actually 6'5", if not 6'6". So like you don't see too many inside linebackers that are that size. And Barker's 6'3". So it's like these are some long linebackers, and they're going to get in the way of some passing lanes. But how are they going to do like against a downhill running team? I'm curious to see that. Now they do have some thumpers too. Julian Davis, who can play the edge as well. He's a 6'2", 230-pound linebacker. DJ Johnson is like maybe 6 foot, but 225, and he'll knock your head off. Like just probably the hardest hitter on the team, pound for pound. Kind of reckless abandon. So like those are the guys I think you'll see more of. Like DJ Johnson kind of has a breakout potential written all over him. He was a massive recruit a couple years ago, like tackle machine, and he's kind of been waiting his turn, as has Julian Davis. Like I feel like those are kind of your next in line players. And then to me, like Damian Wilson, it was his first year really playing consistently. Now he's a senior, former Mizzou transfer. He's got to take the next step. And then Danka, you just don't know how the transition is going to go. Like again, the numbers I feel pretty good about here, but it's like who's going to step up and be the guy? And this is actually going to be probably the theme of every position we talk about on defense. It's kind of the opposite of the offense, no surprise. But good names, and honestly, some older players who seem ready to take the next step. It's just like, are they going to do it?
Well, let's move over to the defensive backs, and I got to say this is probably the one, like from outsider's perspective, that I would be the most nervous about in the secondary, especially the corner position, like you already alluded to earlier. It'll almost look unrecognizable here in 2025 as we see 9 players either graduate or hit the portal. Of those 9, 7 of them were starters or rotational guys, and it looks like this room's going to lean heavily on youngster Jamarly Riddle in 2025. Riddle had a very impressive freshman season, making 6 starts and intercepting 3 balls. I also noticed the staff brought in quite a few transfers to kind of bolster this room. What should our expectations be for this defensive backfield in 2025?
All right, we'll start with the corners. Like I can't even name them all because there's so many new guys. And I will say this: after they lost Savone Rebel last year, they weren't very good at cornerback. So like a lot of these losses, I'm honestly shocked that like Dontavius Nash went to Michigan State. Like Michigan State must have been just desperate for a corner as far as depth, because like he wasn't very good. Now he did have a game-winning interception off a drop pass in the Military Bowl, so like he made a phenomenal play to win that game. But like him and Andrew Wilson Lamp and some of these guys they lost aren't a big deal. Like even Eric Fletcher, he followed Jules Montenar, the former Oklahoma State or the former ECU corners coach to Oklahoma State, as a depth piece. He was probably going to be a second or third stringer. Again, not a guy you want to lose, but like you kind of like, all right, well, whatever, we'll just bring in another guy. And like that's kind of what happened. They just kept losing guys. The one loss they have was Isaiah Brown Murray, who was a consistent, productive corner. Like he was not a guy who's going to jump routes, but you just knew he was not going to like give up the big play last year. So like you at least had that safety net, and now it's just like this giant unknown of just like transfers coming in. And the one guy they do return is Tymer Brown. I'd probably say he's probably a backup as of today, but he's at least an older, experienced player for the most part. And I like what they did in the portal. They added older guys. So Jordy Lowry comes in from Western Carolina. He was an FCS All American there. They added Rashid Reason from ODU, who was with Teron Williams at ODU. So, like, you have that familiarity. They added Chance Graves from Richmond. He was with Teron Williams, who is the new corners coach, by the way, at Richmond for a time. So, you've got that familiarity there. They also added Ladarian Polk, who's, I think, a sixth-year safety. So, he's been around the block. They added Tegan Wilk, who is similar to Xavier McIver. He was at ECU for 4 years. He transferred to Houston. Now he's coming back. So you got he knows the system at safety. So like they've added like all these older transfers who should be able to step in and play right away. Key Crowell was a freshman All-American at the D2 level at the University of Indianapolis at corner. They added Jonathan Akins, who's a good size cornerback from Maryland. So like again, a whole lot of names here. I will say, to me, watching it in the spring, safety was better than corner. I do think Jordy Lowry was good at cornerback, and keeping him after the spring was a priority. So they were able to do that. The other corner position, I saw way too many big plays given up at times. Now, part of that is the receivers are damn good, but also like you just can't be giving up the explosive plays that they gave up, which was corrected towards the end of the spring. But still, I am worried about the secondary, covering the program, just seeing what I saw. I will say, though, Jamarly Riddle, he definitely is going to be a special player going into his sophomore season at safety. Can really run, can really hit, he can return punts. He's just a special athlete. So I feel pretty good about safety between Riddle, Tegan Wilk. They have a few other guys there that have played or are kind of waiting for their turn. Whereas corner, just so many new pieces, new coach, new system. Like, it's just hard to even like try to predict what that unit's going to look like.
Well, you talked about Riddle, and I got to say we were very impressed with Riddle in 2024. He was our freshman defensive player of the week. I don't know, 2, maybe 3 times. He made our all freshman team in 2024. If he hits his ceiling here in 2025, what's that look like?
I think he leads your team in tackles and interceptions. I mean, and I think he's a first team all conference safety if he hits the ceiling. Like, I think he could be that good. To me, that's how I'd break it down. Like, he becomes your guy in the secondary. That, like, Julius Wood was that way a couple years ago for East Carolina at safety. It was like every play he was in on the play. Didn't matter if it was what side of the field it was on. He was around the ball. Like, that to me is Jamarly Riddle's ceiling. Is like he's just always there. Whether he's making the tackle or not, he's in the picture. His presence is felt. Like, to me, that's an elite safety. You can try to like stay away from him, but he's still going to make his presence felt, and like he affects the play even if he's not technically in on it. So that would be his ceiling for me, and I think that in many ways kind of eases the loss of Zakai Barker, who, albeit as a linebacker, was an eraser. I think Riddle can kind of be that guy at safety.
Well, we've talked about all the lost production in the secondary, and guys that are gone, and they weren't so great last year, but there leaves a wide open room for opportunity. In your opinion, who is ready to kind of step up, seize that opportunity, and help make the secondary a success?
I mean, I could name about 10 guys here. If I'll pick one at each position, at corner, I feel like Lowry as an FCS All-American is too easy of an answer. So I'm gonna go with a guy they brought in back in the spring, and I'm gonna go with Key Crowell. I think he's kind of undersized, and he had an up and down spring, but like towards the end of spring, I think he had 6-7 interceptions as a true freshman at the D2 level. You start to see some of that playmaking ability. Like, he looked much more sure of himself, jumping routes, being physical with bigger receivers, and he kind of reminded me of like Malik Fleming and Jaquan McMillan when they were undersized corners, but like not scared of making plays. And like, he's got a great name, like Key as a corner. keeping things on lock. It has a
Yeah,
potential
yeah.
there. So I'm gonna go with him. Part of that is hope for the play of the name, so I can write a cool article one day. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things where he has the potential, and now it's just does he believe in himself at this level enough? And at safety, I'll go a little bit under the radar here, but a guy that I like athletically, and it's just can he put it together? His name is Kamari McKinley. I think a redshirt sophomore, really good size and length. I want to say 6'2", close to 200 pounds. He runs well. And like there's times I practice, I'm like, this dude looks like the real deal. And then at times he just disappears. So like I feel like more than likely Riddle is going to start there, but I you can't ask Riddle to do everything, and you need a second safety to step up. So I'm going to go Kamari McKinley as a guy to add some depth on the back end at a much needed position.
All right. Well, just like the offensive side, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Defensive player to have a breakout season. There's so many candidates, given all the names we've been through.
I mean,
I'm gonna,
nationally, it's got to be Riddle, right?
yeah. I mean, like nationally, Riddle is for sure the guy because like outside of ECU's program or you guys that follow him closely, like nobody probably knows Jamali Riddle outside of the American and the G5. So like, I'll go Jamali Riddle. He's been getting that type of buzz. I just think he's got all the tools. I do think at linebacker, I think DJ Johnson's got a chance to be like you look up at the end of the year and he leads the team in tackles type of season. And does that make him a national breakout candidate? I don't know, but at least like across the conference, he
Sure.
has the
Yeah.
counting stats that matter.
All right. Well, we've talked some offense, we've talked some defense. Let's move over to the special teams. How are those units looking, and are there any concerns?
I feel pretty good about special teams. This is a sore subject with ECU fans. Anytime you bring up special teams, um, like it feels like every damn year they're missing extra points. I think it was at ODU last year where the crossbar got stuck in the net and missing an extra
Oh
point and
yeah,
all that.
yeah, yep, yep,
Like
yep.
there's just always something happening that shouldn't be happening on special teams. Um, I do love that Blake Harrell went out in the offseason and said, all right, we have some punters and kickers coming back, but let's go add more. So they added Nick Mazey, a transfer from New Hampshire who's kicked a lot over the last 3 years. He'll compete with Andrew Conrad and Noah Perez. So you got three kickers who have kicked and had success and inconsistent success at that as well. But you got three kickers with legitimate game experience. Like I love that. Like do everything you can to have a damn kicker that can kick it through the uprights. Punter, they do lose Luke Larson. Many will say that it's not a loss. That is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. But they did bring in Ryan Levy, transfer punter from Duke, who used to be the starting punter at Furman. So he's kicked. And then Thomas O'Halloran is an Australian redshirt freshman punter. Those two guys will compete for the job. I think whoever wins, they'll be solid. I don't know if they'll be great. But I mean, punting is punting. I mean, as long as you're not getting punts blocked and punting them 30 yards, shanking them out of bounds, it kind of is what it is. But I think they'll have a solid punter. Return game, Brock Spalding did it at a pretty good level last year. He got hurt, missed the second half of the season. They toyed with having Riddle back there. Do they do that again? He may be too valuable. I don't know. Don't be surprised if you see, Jaquez Petaway get a look, the Oklahoma transfer, also Jiron Waiters, who we talked about earlier, and then Marlon Gunn has done. They've got like 20 dudes who could return the ball. So I think they'll be solid. But I don't know. If they're just okay on special teams and not losing games on special teams, I think most ECU fans will take that as a win.
Well, as we approach fall camp, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
For me, you could say the entire defense. I think this offense is going to be really good. I think the defense is going to have major concerns, and I think a lot of it does go back to corner for me. Safety does need to be more consistent as well, but I think with just having Riddle there, you feel pretty good about it, and Tegan Wilk back as well. You have some experience. Corner, and I honestly feel better about the defensive line than probably inside linebacker. So corner and inside linebacker for me are my two question marks.
In today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how have you seen that change ECU's recruiting philosophy?
I think I think it's stayed relatively the same under Mike Houston. I think Blake Harrell has changed it a little bit in that I don't expect the high school. They've been taking 20 to 25 high school commits most years. I think they'll take more like 15, 16, and save the rest for transfers. I don't expect them right now to use rev share on high school recruits unless it's like a quarterback or a major, potential game changer. I do expect them to use rev share as much as possible on high profile transfers and also player retainment. And I think it'll mostly be that way across the group of five because, like, I just don't think, and ECU is investing at a pretty high level right now. And still, I just don't think you have the money to go out and like offer some random 3-star receiver, $25,000 of ref share if you only have a few million to spend. And that's, some of that has to go to men's basketball, some of that has to go to baseball at ECU. So, like, you have to prioritize where you spend it. And to me, you're better off spending it on, all right, who are our star players that we need to retain and have a shot to retain and do that. And then, all right, we need a quarterback. Let's go spend $400,000 or $300,000 on a quarterback next year, whether that's keeping Caden Hauser home if he has a breakout season or, getting some stud. I don't know. Um, I think that's kind of where they're going to prioritize the money. The guys who are at the top of the food chain are going to get a good chunk. You'll also try to lure some transfers at impact positions as well. And then you still have to recruit high school talent and develop it. Otherwise, you're not going to have like Jamali Riddle probably was getting paid very little last year. He has a breakout freshman season as he was highly recruited to a degree, but he wasn't some big name recruit. All of a sudden, he's getting paid pretty good now. So, like, you're still going to have to recruit and develop talent as well as try to retain it.
How do you feel the staff has done navigating the portal?
I think pretty solid. This year has been interesting. I want to say last year, coming off the 2-10 season, it was almost like, man, we got to hit, like, we got to hit on the portal or we're screwed. We got no shot, and it was a feeling of desperation. And like they added some big names, and some of those worked out, some of them didn't. This year, I almost feel like it was like, all right, let's retain our star pieces from our 8-win team first and foremost, and let's add like quality pieces, but maybe not break the bank on like massive star player because like they kind of spent most of their, I won't say most, they spent a lot of their money on player retainment, like Caden Hauser, Jamarion McCrimmon, the Smiths at receiver, J.D. Lampley, Raheem Craig, Sam Danka, Jamarly Riddle. Like they had a pretty good core, and I think they went and spent a lot of that on the core. And then with the portal, it was almost like, all right, instead of spending a ton of money on one corner, let's go out and get 7. You know, or instead of spending a ton of money on, one offensive lineman, let's go and get 3 or 4. And, I think, for a decent amount. So, like, I think that's kind of the approach they've taken. And as a result, they haven't really landed like some massive star studded list of names. And I think that's fine. I don't think they needed to. I'd much rather keep Caden Hauser than have to go hunt for a quarterback and spend all your money on that. Or I'd much rather keep Jamarly Riddle than have to go land, an all conference player from Conference USA or an SEC safety who didn't play as much. So I feel like it was a nice blend. They did add a lot of DBs, as you mentioned. And I just think anytime you do that, some are going to work, some aren't. And like, I'm fine using a bunch of bullets there and seeing what hits and what doesn't. That's kind of the philosophy you have to take, unless you're fortunate enough to get a sure thing, which at a school like ECU is not super easy all the time.
With the recent departure of Texas State from the Sun Belt to the Pac-12, the addition of Louisiana Tech to the Sun Belt from Conference USA, and some what I think some pretty big conference realignment kind of looming here in the future. What do you think that means for East Carolina?
I think ECU currently, like the American, is the only realistic fit from a financial standpoint. And we all know that finances rule college sports right now. So will this change in 5, 6 years? Like to me, 2030, 31 is where I see
Yep.
another big shift coming. Like that's when all the TV contracts are set to expire from the group of five, and the ACC has a major drop off in its buyout. So like it wouldn't surprise me at all if Clemson, Florida State, maybe North Carolina leave the ACC. Then that creates a domino effect. Like I think that's what ECU would like to. Hey, let's have success in the American, and then see where things break over time. I know the Sun Belt has been interested in ECU. The financial aspect of it is right now ECU's making like a little over 7 million off the TV contract. Sun Belt's making, I think, somewhere between 1 and 2 per team. And so, like, even though you'd be more regionally rivaled, people would much rather face ODU and App State than Tulsa and
Sure.
North Texas. But like the money right now, just it doesn't add up. Plus, the biggest thing is the buyout fee. ECU would have to pay a buyout fee over 20 million to leave the American. So like you throw that in, that's just not good business. So
Yep.
you have to stay in the American. I do think long term, let's say college football falls apart, the ACC falls apart, ECU doesn't get into a watered down ACC, as many Pirate fans want to call it. And then all of a sudden, like Memphis leaves the American, USF leaves the American, and then what are you left with? Like it's ECU and a bunch of Texas schools and Temple. Like to me, like I don't think anybody would want to stay in that league, and so maybe then you look at some sort of merger or something with the Sun Belt. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. Like I really think in 10 years, ECU is either, to me, unless there's like some sort of American Sun Belt merger, which I wouldn't rule out. You know, if you took the best of the American and the best of the Sun Belt, I think it'd be a pretty good conference. But I don't know how realistic that is. Either way, I think ECU is either in some sort of like watered down ACC or some sort of Sun Belt. Like I just don't know if the American long term makes a lot of sense for ECU. It's mainly a big market league with a bunch of schools that have no real like fan bases. As weird as
Yeah.
it is to say,
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know. It reminds me of old Conference USA. It's every
definitely.
man for themselves.
Yeah, that's certainly how it feels. And look, you got to go where the money is. The money for ECU right now is in the American. I do love Tim Pernetti, the new American commissioner. I'm a huge fan of. So like I think despite them losing some star power here, I think he's going to do a good job leading the conference. So ECU is just in wait and see mode, as are a lot of schools. But it's certainly fascinating to watch. Never a dull moment, I can tell you that.
Well, what do you think will be the main strength of this 2025 team?
I think it's got to be the offense. I just think they're going to be able to score a lot of points, and I mean they're definitely going to rack up the yards, and they got to be more consistent in the red zone, which they were the second half of the season. But I think they could be even more consistent if they don't turn the ball over as much, and they're better in the red zone. And if they do those things, like you look across college football, I was ranking the quarterbacks ECU plays this coming season recently, and like it's mind boggling to see the amount of movement at quarterback and at the coordinator positions. So like ECU has this offensive coordinator and they have its quarterback back, and they've got their top, two of their top receivers, I should say. They've got a few of their top offensive linemen. They got a decent amount of running backs back. So they do lose some key pieces, certainly. Don't get me wrong. But, like, compared to most teams that ECU plays, I mean, they've got great continuity and a damn good coordinator, in my opinion. So, like, there's no reason they shouldn't be good on offense, and they should score points. Now, defensively, it's a massive concern. So they're going to have to outscore some teams and just create enough turnovers to get the offense more opportunities. But I'd be pretty disappointed if this offense wasn't pretty good, if not very good in 2025.
What does success look like for the Pirates in 2025?
To me, they've got to at least get back to a bowl game. The Vegas over under is at 6.5. I think that's a great number. You look at the schedule. There's a very real reality that ECU could be a better team but have a worse record than last year because the schedule is much more difficult. You once again draw Tulane in the conference. ECU missed out on them last year. You get Memphis back on the schedule. ECU didn't have to play Memphis last year. You go to UTSA. UTSA was 0-6 in true road games last year and 6-0 in home games last year. So like you're playing two different teams there. So like the American schedule is much harder. You also open at NC State, who's going to want revenge. You host BYU, which seems a little more winnable now after the Retzloff situation, but you're still going to be an underdog in that game, realistically. So like it's not an easy schedule. The first half of it is really tough. You go to Coastal. After BYU, you get Army on a short week, and then you go to Tulane on a Thursday night. So, like, the first 6 games, they have to survive that stretch, and they get a little bit of a break with the schedule. I think, to me, getting back to a bowl game at minimum is kind of I won't say a must, but it's what most fans want in terms of if you're going to define success, you got to at least get back to a bowl. And I would say, like, for it to truly be a success, you probably need to get to 7 wins. If you go 6-6, it's just kind of an empty feeling unless, depending on the circumstances. And like to truly be like an undoubted success would be to, at least compete towards the top half of the league. I think ECU fans want to see this team get back in the conference championship contention, which they've never done in the American. I mean, that's just the reality. They haven't won a conference championship in general since 2009 in Conference USA. So, I mean, we're going up on 2 decades now here shortly. So, that would be the ultimate success you can't deny, but how realistic is that given the losses on defense? I don't think it's completely unrealistic. I just don't think ECU is a favorite for that. So I would say definite success getting back to a bowl game and maybe pushing for the upper half of the league.
Yeah, ECU for me kind of feels like a dark horse, right? I mean, I think it feels like a lot of the AAC, in my opinion, is like East Carolina. Great offense, not so great defense. And so, to me, I feel like Navy's probably like, the favorite, but then like after that, man, it feels somewhat wide open to me. When I look at that schedule, the game that really excites me is that game against UTSA. Cause I just see fireworks, right? Offense, offense, offense.
We know UTSA can't stop anybody, and there's a very good chance ECU will not be able to stop anybody, especially in the Alamo Dome. They get that thing rolling in there. I could see that. And yeah, I mean, like Tulane, I want to say is the betting favorite, and like their quarterback situation is way up in the air. Yeah, so like I think defensively they could be good, and maybe that's the American sucks at defense, and maybe that's what matters. But like I don't know if I'd put money on Tulane to win the league as of today. Like I would. Yeah. I'm with you, man. Like even Memphis has legitimate question marks, and it's a pretty wide open league. It's kind of fascinating, to be honest. And there's some I think FAU with Landon Veltkamp is kind of a dark horse as well. Although with a first year head coach, you don't know. But there's a lot of intrigue, I think, for the American really across the board.
Well, Stephen, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 East Carolina Pirates football team?
The main thing is, man, just if you're going to watch an ECU game, make sure you got plenty of beer because it's going to be a long, stressful evening, most likely. By the way, a lot of night games, which is not good for yours truly because a lot of high scoring, a lot of commercials. I'm going to be up in the press box working till like 2 a.m. most nights, but hey, I'll take it, man. It beats a lot of other jobs out there.
Amen to that. Well, Stephen, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it. But before we let you go, we're going to give you an opportunity to highlight the work you're doing over there at Hoist the Colors and maybe highlight some things that you have coming up.
Yeah, check us out, hoistthecolors.net, the East Carolina 24/7 sports site. The biggest thing is, man, preseason camp coming up here shortly. We will have the most in-depth coverage of ECU preseason camp you can find anywhere. Our VIP reports. We'll also have photo galleries. We'll have some free stuff if you don't want to pay for VIP, but strongly encourage anybody looking for in-depth analysis, what's going on behind the scenes, injuries, breaking news, all that sort of stuff. We will be out there every single day we can of preseason camp. Also have media days coming up here at the end of July for the American in Charlotte. I can actually go this year. It's a miracle. So looking forward to that. But yeah, just check us out, Hoist the Colors, and looking forward to the season.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.